The hospital smell still clung to my clothes when I walked into Dad's office that Tuesday morning, 3 days. That's how long it had been since Robert Thompson, the man who built this company from nothing, suffered a massive stroke while reviewing our quarterly reports. 3 days since our world turned upside down, and now Dylan was sitting behind Dad's mahogany desk like he'd been there his whole life. His fingers drummed against the leather desktop as he watched me approach. No greeting, no concern about how Dad was doing, just those cold gray eyes that had always carried a hint of resentment. On the desk between us lay a single manila folder with my name typed across the tab, Marcus Thompson. Personnel review, immediate action required. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I should have seen it coming. The signs were all there, scattered like breadcrumbs through the past 6 months. Dylan's late-night meetings with the accountant, his sudden interest in reviewing employee contracts, the way he'd started questioning my decisions in front of the crew, undermining 20 years of trust I'd built with every craftsman on that floor. But I was too focused on the business, too concerned with keeping Thompson's custom furniture running while Dad's health deteriorated, to notice that my own brother was sharpening his knife. My name is Marcus Thompson. I'm 32 years old, and until this moment I was the lead designer and operations director at Thompson's Custom Furniture and Design. For the past 8 years I'd poured every ounce of my soul into this company. While Dylan was off getting his business degree and playing fraternity games, I was learning the difference between quarter-sawn oak and plain sawn, mastering dovetail joints that would last a century, understanding that furniture isn't just about function, it's about legacy. Dad always said I had the vision and the hands to carry on what he started. Apparently, my brother had different plans. Dylan cleared his throat and slid the folder across the polished surface. His voice carried that practiced corporate tone he'd developed since graduating, the one that made every conversation feel like a board meeting. Marcus, we need to discuss some immediate operational changes. With Dad's situation, the company needs new leadership structure. I've been appointed interim CEO by the board of directors. The board of directors. 3 people. Mom, who was spending every waking hour at Dad's bedside. Jake Morrison, our operations manager who'd been with us for 15 years, and Dylan himself. I wondered how that vote had gone. I didn't reach for the folder immediately. Something in his posture, the way he avoided my eyes, told me that whatever was inside would change everything. Dylan continued, his words measured and rehearsed. We've conducted a comprehensive review of all salaries and responsibilities. Given the current financial pressures and the need to streamline operations, your position is being restructured. Effective immediately, you'll be transitioning from operations director to senior craftsman. Your new salary reflects market rates for that position. The words hit me like a physical blow. Senior craftsman, a 50% pay cut. From running the entire operation to being just another employee on the floor. I finally opened the folder, scanning the official letterhead and corporate language that reduced 20 years of my life to a few paragraphs. Due to operational restructuring requirements and budgetary constraints, Marcus Thompson's role will transition from operations director to senior craftsman, level 3. Compensation adjustment, annual salary reduced from $89,000 to $44,500. Effective immediately. Benefits package revised accordingly. This decision reflects current market conditions and operational efficiency requirements. The language was cold, impersonal, designed to make it sound like a business decision, rather than what it really was. A betrayal. Dylan watched me read, his fingers still drumming against the desk. When I looked up, he was staring out the window at the workshop floor, where our craftsmen were already starting their day, unaware that everything was about to change. I know this is difficult, Marcus, but we have to think about the company's survival. Dad's medical bills are going to be substantial, and we can't afford redundant management positions. redundant management positions. As if the past 8 years of building relationships with suppliers, landing major contracts, and training half the workforce meant nothing. What hurt more than the demotion was the timing. 2 weeks ago, I'd closed the biggest deal in company history. Pacific Cascade Hotels had signed a $2.3 million contract for custom furniture across their 12 luxury properties. 18 months of negotiations, site visits, prototype development, and relationship building had finally paid off. I'd worked 16-hour days, traveled to Seattle and San Francisco dozen times, and personally designed every piece in their catalog. The contract was set to launch next month, guaranteeing our workers steady employment for the next 2 years. And now Dylan was sitting in Dad's chair, reaping the benefits of my work while treating me like dead weight. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I'd been focused on growing the business, Dylan had been focused on positioning himself to control it. During Dad's gradual decline over the past year, while I was managing day-to-day operations and keeping clients happy, Dylan had been whispering in ears, building alliances, and preparing for this moment. He'd convinced Mom that the company needed professional management and business school expertise. He'd sold Jake on the idea that modern efficiency required streamlined leadership, and he'd waited for the perfect moment to strike. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed late, perfecting designs and solving production problems while Dylan was out networking at business mixers. I remembered the weekend I'd spent in the emergency room with Tom Rodriguez, one of our veteran craftsmen, after he'd cut his hand on a table saw, making sure his family was taken care of and his medical bills were covered. I thought about the Christmas bonuses I'd fought for, the safety improvements I'd implemented, the apprenticeship program I'd developed to bring young people into the trade. All of it suddenly felt meaningless, reduced to a line item in Dylan's efficiency analysis. The worst part was seeing Dad's office transformed. Dylan had already removed most of Dad's personal items. The photos of finished pieces, the awards from the Furniture Makers Guild, the handwritten thank you notes from satisfied clients, all gone. In their place were Dylan's business school diplomas, a new laptop, and a stack of management books. He'd even replaced Dad's old wooden desk lamp, the one Dad had made himself from walnut scraps, with a sleek chrome modern fixture. It was like watching our family's history being systematically erased. As I sat there processing the magnitude of what was happening, memories flooded back. I was 8 years old, standing on a milk crate next to Dad's workbench, learning to sand with the grain. "Patience, son," he'd say. "Good furniture can't be rushed. Every piece tells a story, we're just helping it find its voice." At 16, he taught me to read wood grain like a book, understanding how each board wanted to be cut, how to work with the natural stresses and grain patterns instead of fighting against them. By 20,
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
I could design a piece in my head, visualize how every joint would fit together, and execute it with my hands. Dylan had never shown that kind of interest. Even as a kid, he was more fascinated by Dad's business meetings than his workshop techniques. While I was learning mortise and tenon joints, Dylan was asking about profit margins and market penetration. Dad used to joke that he had one son who understood wood and another who understood money. "Both are important," he'd say, "but the wood comes first. Without craftsmanship, we're just another furniture store." Now it seemed like Dylan had forgotten that fundamental truth. I glanced through the window at the workshop floor, where Jake was directing the morning operations. 12 craftsmen were already at work on various projects, the familiar sounds of hand planes and chisels creating the symphony I'd grown up with. These weren't just employees, they were artisans who'd learned their trade through decades of experience. Men like Tom Rodriguez, who could shape a cabriole leg by hand that would rival anything made 2 centuries ago. Women like Sarah Kim, whose finishing techniques had won awards at national furniture shows. They trusted me, respected my judgment, and looked to me for leadership. Now I'd be working alongside them as an equal, stripped of authority and influence. The financial reality hit me like a sledgehammer. My mortgage payment alone was $2,800 a month, add car payments, insurance, and basic living expenses, and I was looking at a monthly shortfall of nearly $2,000. Dylan knew this, he'd seen my employee file, knew my financial obligations. This wasn't just a demotion, it was designed to force me out entirely. He wanted me to quit, to walk away from everything I'd built, so he could run the company without interference or opposition. But what Dylan didn't know, what he couldn't know, because he'd never been involved in the actual contract negotiations, was the secret I'd built into every major deal we'd signed. It was something I'd learned from Dad years ago, back when we were a smaller operation, and losing a key contract could destroy us. Always protect yourself, son, Dad had taught me. Business is business, but family is forever. Sometimes you need insurance that both will survive. The Pacific Cascade contract, like every major agreement I'd negotiated in the past 5 years, contained a specific clause buried deep in the technical specifications. Clause 15C stated that all design work and production oversight must be conducted by Marcus Thompson, Master Craftsman, or approved designate with equivalent certification and client approval. It was standard language in high-end custom work, ensuring that the person who designed the pieces would oversee their creation, but it also meant that Pacific Cascade had contracted specifically for my expertise, not just Thompson's custom furniture. Dylan had no Master Craftsman certification, he'd never completed an apprenticeship, never studied under a guild master, never even built a piece of furniture from start to finish. His business degree and management theories were worthless when it came to the technical requirements of our most valuable contracts. He could demote me, cut my salary, and strip away my title, but he couldn't replicate the credentials and relationships that kept our biggest clients satisfied. As I folded the personnel review document and slid it back across the desk, I made a decision. I wouldn't fight this. Not yet. Dylan expected anger, arguments, threats to quit. Instead, I would give him something much more dangerous: compliance. I would take the demotion, accept the pay cut, and watch as he learned the hard way that running a custom furniture business required more than spreadsheets and efficiency reports. All right, I said simply, standing up from the chair. When do I start my new position? Dylan's eyes widened slightly, clearly surprised by my calm acceptance. He'd prepared for a confrontation, maybe even hoped for one. Instead, I was giving him exactly what he thought he wanted: complete control, no resistance, a clear path to implement his vision for the company. He had no idea that he was about to discover the difference between managing a business and understanding it. That afternoon, I cleaned out my office on the second floor. 20 years of blueprints, client correspondence, supplier contacts, and project files packed into 3 cardboard boxes. Dylan had already assigned the space to Linda Walsh, a recent hire with an MBA who'd been brought in to handle strategic planning and business development. She was smart, capable, and completely unaware that her new role was built on quicksand. As I carried my boxes down to the main floor, past the workbenches where I'd spent countless hours perfecting my craft, I felt a strange sense of liberation. For years, I'd been caught between two worlds: the creative satisfaction of working with my hands and the administrative burden of running operations. Now Dylan had freed me from the spreadsheets and meetings, allowing me to return to what I truly loved. He thought he was punishing me, but he'd actually given me the perfect vantage point to watch his inexperience destroy everything we'd built. My new workspace was a small desk in the quality control area, surrounded by half-finished pieces waiting for final inspection. No computer, no phone, no access to client files or supplier databases. Dylan had literally reduced me to the status of entry-level employee, someone who would follow orders and execute other people's designs. What he didn't realize was that from this position, I could see everything. Every mistake, every shortcut, every crack in the foundation he thought he was building. The first sign of trouble came within a week. Pacific Cascades project manager Jennifer Liu called the main office asking to speak with me about production timeline adjustments. The receptionist transferred her to Dylan, who confidently assured her that he was handling all major accounts personally. Jennifer's response was polite but firm. The contract specified that all project communications must go through me as the designated master craftsman. Dylan's voice carried through the thin office walls as he argued that he was now in charge of operations, that company hierarchy had changed, that Jennifer would need to adapt to new management protocols. The conversation ended badly. Jennifer requested a copy of Dylan's credentials and certification documentation, which of course didn't exist. When Dylan couldn't provide proof of equivalent qualifications, Jennifer invoked the contract terms and suspended all project approvals pending resolution. Within hours, Pacific Cascades' legal department had sent a formal notice: unless Marcus Thompson resumed his designated role on the project, they would consider the contract in breach and seek alternative suppliers. I watched Dylan's panic unfold from my desk in the quality control area. Suddenly, the office was full of emergency meetings, frantic phone calls, and heated discussions about legal options. Linda Walsh, the MBA who'd taken over my office, spent 2 days researching industry certification requirements and discovered what I'd known all along: master craftsman status required years of apprenticeship, guild examination, and peer recognition. It couldn't be purchased or transferred, it had to be earned. By Friday of that first week, 3 more clients had raised similar concerns. The Meridian Restaurant Group questioned why their project coordinator was no longer returning emails. Portland General Hospital's facilities manager wanted to know why design revisions were being handled by someone who wasn't familiar with medical furniture safety regulations. Each conversation revealed the same fundamental problem: Dylan had the title and the authority, but he lacked the knowledge and relationships that actually ran the business. The beautiful irony was that Dylan's business school training had taught him to optimize systems and eliminate redundancies, but he'd failed to understand that in a craft-based business, relationships and expertise aren't redundancies. They're the foundation everything else is built on. He'd assumed that management skills were transferable, that running Thompson's custom furniture was no different from running any other company. He was about to learn that wood doesn't care about your MBA, and clients don't trust their projects to someone who's never held a chisel. As I sat at my small desk that Friday evening, watching Dylan pace frantically in Dad's office while Linda Walsh spread contract documents across the conference table, I felt a calm certainty settle over me. Dylan thought he'd won by demoting me, but he'd actually handed me the most powerful position of all: the ability to watch his inexperience destroy itself while remaining completely blameless. I hadn't fought his decision, hadn't challenged his authority, hadn't given him any reason to blame me for the chaos that was beginning to unfold. The phone rang again, and I heard Dylan's voice growing more strained as he tried to explain to another confused client why their designated project manager was no longer available. Through the thin walls, I could hear Linda suggesting they hire an outside consultant with proper credentials, not realizing that would cost more than my entire annual salary and still wouldn't solve the relationship problem. These clients had worked with me personally, trusted my judgment, and expected my continued involvement. No amount of corporate restructuring could replicate that trust. As the sun set over Portland and the workshop fell quiet, I began to understand that Dylan's betrayal had given me something unexpected: clarity. For the first time in years, I could see exactly what mattered and what didn't. The title, the office, the administrative burden, none of that was real power. Real power was being the person clients specifically requested, the craftsman whose name appeared in contracts, the expert whose approval determined whether projects moved forward or ground to a halt. Dylan had taken away my job description, but he couldn't take away my expertise, and in the custom furniture business, expertise was everything. Part 2. The deeper wounds. Monday morning arrived, with the kind of gray Portland drizzle that seemed to seep into everything, including my mood. I drove to work in my old pickup truck, the same one I'd been using to haul lumber and delivery furniture for the past decade. Dylan had a new Lexus in the executive parking spot, the one that used to belong to Dad. Even the parking arrangements had been reorganized to reflect the new hierarchy, with my truck now relegated to the employee lot behind the building where delivery drivers and hourly workers parked. Walking through the main entrance felt different now. For years, I'd bounded up the stairs to my second-floor office, greeting everyone along the way, checking on projects, solving problems before they became crises. Now I walked straight to my small desk in the quality control area, past conversations that stopped when I approached, past eyes that wouldn't quite meet mine. Word had spread through the workshop faster than sawdust in a windstorm. Marcus had been demoted. Dylan was in charge. Everything was changing. The hardest part wasn't the whispered conversations or the sympathetic glances from longtime employees, it was watching Dylan try to fill a role he fundamentally didn't understand. That first Monday, he called an all-hands meeting in the main workshop, gathering 45 employees around the central assembly table, where we usually displayed our finest pieces. He stood on a wooden crate, still wearing his expensive suit while surrounded by people in work clothes covered in wood stain and sawdust. Dylan's speech was everything I'd expected and nothing the crew needed to hear. He talked about efficiency metrics, cost optimization, and competitive positioning. He used phrases like maximizing human capital and streamlining operational redundancies while speaking to craftsmen who measured success in the smoothness of a hand-planed surface and the perfect fit of a mortise and tenon joint. Tom Rodriguez, who'd been with us for 18 years, leaned over to Sarah Kim and whispered something that made her shake her head sadly. These weren't corporate employees who could be motivated by buzzwords and performance indicators. They were artisans who took pride in their craft and valued respect over rhetoric. When Dylan finished his presentation and asked for questions, the silence stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, Jake Morrison, our operations manager and Dad's longtime friend, raised his hand. "Dylan, what about the Pacific Cascade project? Jennifer Liu has been calling all weekend about the production schedule changes. She specifically wants to talk to Marcus about the joinery specifications for the hotel lobby pieces." Dylan's jaw tightened slightly, and I could see him fighting to maintain his composure. "All client communications will now go through me or Linda Walsh. We're implementing a more professional account management system." Jake's expression didn't change, but I caught the slight shake of his head. "Son, these clients have been working with Marcus for months. They trust his expertise. Jennifer Liu has been in the furniture business for 20 years, and she knows quality when she sees it. She's not going to feel comfortable taking technical advice from someone who's never built a piece of furniture." The workshop fell completely silent. Dylan's face flushed red, and I could see his hands clench into fists at his sides. For a moment, I thought he might actually lose control, but he managed to keep his voice level. "Jake, I appreciate your concerns, but decisions have been made. We need to trust the new management structure." Jake nodded slowly, but his expression said everything about what he thought of that management structure. As the meeting broke up and workers returned to their stations, I noticed the body language throughout the room. These people had accepted me as their leader because I'd earned their respect through knowledge and fair treatment. Dylan was trying to command that same respect through authority and title, not understanding that respect couldn't be inherited or imposed. The real problem started later that week, when Dylan decided to implement his first major operational changes. He'd hired a consultant from Seattle, an efficiency expert named Michael Barnes, who specialized in manufacturing optimization. Barnes spent 3 days walking through our workshop with a clipboard and a stopwatch, timing every process and analyzing every workflow. He treated our craftsmen like factory workers, measuring their productivity in pieces per hour instead of quality per piece. Barnes's report was everything Dylan wanted to hear, and everything that would destroy us. He recommended reducing the time allocated for hand finishing by 30%, eliminating the final inspection process that I'd implemented, and switching to less expensive hardwoods for internal framework components. Each suggestion would save money in the short term, while destroying the reputation we'd built over 25 years. Dylan embraced every recommendation enthusiastically, seeing dollar signs instead of the catastrophic long-term consequences. I watched from my desk as Barnes explained his efficiency improvements to Dylan and Linda Walsh in the conference room. Charts and graphs covered the whiteboard, showing projected cost savings and increased throughput. Barnes pointed to a pie chart breaking down labor costs and suggested that skilled craftsmen were being underutilized, that many of their specialized techniques could be replaced by automated processes or less experienced workers. Dylan nodded eagerly, taking notes and asking about implementation timelines. What Barnes and Dylan didn't understand was that Thompson's Custom Furniture wasn't a manufacturing company. We were artists who happened to work in wood. Our clients paid premium prices because they knew every piece was crafted by masters who took personal pride in their work. The hand-rubbed finishes, the perfectly fitted joints, the attention to detail that took extra time but lasted generations, these weren't inefficiencies to be optimized away. They were the entire reason for our existence. The first disaster struck on Thursday when Dylan implemented Barnes's recommendation to reduce finishing time. Sarah Kim had been working on a dining room set for the Cascade Heights development, 12 chairs that required matching wood grain and perfectly blended stain colors. Under the old schedule, she would have spent 2 full days on the finishing process, building up multiple coats of stain and polyurethane, sanding between each coat until the surface felt like silk. Dylan's new timeline gave her 6 hours. I was inspecting completed pieces when Sarah approached my desk, her face drawn with frustration and anger. She'd been with us for 8 years, working her way up from apprentice to master finisher, and she'd never brought me a substandard piece. Now she stood beside the dining chairs, pointing out the problems that the rushed schedule had created. The stain was uneven, darker in some areas where she hadn't had time to blend properly. The polyurethane finish showed brush marks because there hadn't been time for proper sanding between coats. Most damaging of all, the grain patterns didn't match between chairs because she'd been forced to work with whatever wood was immediately available instead of carefully selecting boards. "Marcus, I can't put my name on this work," Sarah said quietly, her voice heavy with shame. "In 8 years, I've never delivered anything that didn't meet our standards, but Dylan told me directly that the timeline couldn't be adjusted, that client delivery dates were more important than what he called perfectionist tendencies. These chairs look like something you'd buy at a furniture store, not something we'd build." I examined the pieces carefully, seeing exactly what she meant. They were functional, even attractive at first glance, but they lacked the depth and richness that made our work special. Any experienced furniture buyer would immediately recognize the compromise in quality. The situation got worse when Dylan decided to personally deliver the dining set to Cascade Heights, wanting to handle the high-profile client interaction himself. I learned about the disaster secondhand from Jennifer Liu, who called the main office an hour after Dylan left the client site. Her voice was professional, but strained as she spoke to the receptionist, asking to be transferred directly to me. When told that all client communications now went through Dylan or Linda Walsh, Jennifer's response was immediate and devastating. "Then please inform Dylan Thompson that Cascade Heights is rejecting the delivery. The staining is unacceptable, the finish quality is below contract specifications, and the grain matching is completely inconsistent with the samples we approved. We've photographed everything for documentation purposes, and our legal team is reviewing the contract terms regarding quality standards. We need Marcus Thompson on site tomorrow morning to assess the situation and develop a correction plan, or we'll be forced to consider this a breach of contract." I watched through the workshop windows as Dylan's Lexus pulled into the parking lot 20 minutes later. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in his posture as he slammed the car door and stalked toward the building. His face was dark with anger and embarrassment, his expensive suit wrinkled from what had obviously been a very uncomfortable conversation. Linda Walsh met him at the door, and they immediately disappeared into the conference room where their voices carried through the thin walls for the next hour. The Cascade Heights rejection sent shockwaves through the entire company. Within 2 hours, Jake Morrison had quietly gathered the senior craftsmen for an unofficial meeting in the lumber storage area. I wasn't invited officially, but Tom Rodriguez made sure I knew when and where it was happening. As the newest member of the regular workforce, I stood in the back while Jake addressed concerns that everyone shared but no one wanted to voice publicly. Look, we all know what happened today, Jake said, his voice carrying the weight of 20 years' experience. This isn't about Marcus getting demoted or Dylan getting promoted. This is about fundamental changes to how we do business, and those changes are going to destroy everything Robert built. He gestured toward the main workshop where half-finished pieces waited for attention they might not receive. We've got 6 major projects in production right now, all of them with specific quality requirements that these new efficiency standards won't allow us to meet. Tom Rodriguez raised his hand, his weathered face showing the strain of the situation. Jake, what are we supposed to do? Dylan's the boss now, and he's got consultants telling him we're wasting time and money on unnecessary craftsmanship. But these clients aren't buying our furniture because it's cheap or fast. They're buying it because it's the best they can get anywhere. Sarah Kim nodded in agreement, adding her own perspective from the finishing department. I've been getting pressure to cut corners on every piece, Sarah said. Dylan reviews my work schedule weekly now, timing how long I spend on each finishing stage. When I tried to explain that different woods require different approaches, he showed me a chart from Barnes's report proving that standardized processes are more cost-effective. He doesn't understand that cost-effective and quality don't always align in custom work. The meeting continued for another hour, with each craftsman sharing similar stories of pressure to prioritize speed over excellence, efficiency over artistry. Jake listened to every concern, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions, but the fundamental problem remained unchanged. Dylan had authority, but he lacked understanding. He could mandate new processes, but he couldn't comprehend why the old processes existed in the first place. As the group dispersed back to their workstations, Jake approached me privately. His expression was troubled, and I could see the conflict playing out behind his eyes. He'd been Dad's friend and business partner for 2 decades, but he was also watching the company's reputation being systematically destroyed by good intentions and bad judgment. Marcus, I need to ask you something directly, Jake said, keeping his voice low enough that others couldn't overhear. Robert put a lot of trust in you over the years. You know this business inside and out, and you understand what makes us special. These efficiency improvements are going to kill us, not immediately, but over time, as word spreads about compromised quality and missed expectations. Is there anything you can do to help Dylan understand what he's destroying? I considered Jake's question carefully. Part of me wanted to march into Dylan's office and explain exactly why Barnes's recommendations would ruin us. I could have laid out the mathematics of reputation, shown him how 25 years of trust could be destroyed in 6 months of shortcuts, demonstrated the difference between manufacturing efficiency and craftsmanship excellence. But doing so would undermine the very lesson Dylan needed to learn. He dismissed my expertise and relegated me to manual labor. Now he needed to discover firsthand why that expertise had mattered. Jake, I appreciate your position, and I understand your concerns, I replied. But Dylan made it clear that he's in charge now, and that all strategic decisions go through him. If I start second-guessing his management choices, he'll see it as insubordination or an attempt to undermine his authority. The best thing I can do right now is focus on my new role, and let Dylan's leadership speak for itself. Jake nodded slowly, understanding the subtext of what I wasn't saying directly. He'd worked with Dad long enough to recognize the same calculated patience I'd learned from watching Robert Thompson handle difficult situations. Sometimes the most powerful response to poor leadership wasn't opposition or argument, but simply allowing the consequences to unfold naturally while maintaining your own integrity and professionalism. The week ended with more bad news. Portland General Hospital's facilities manager David Chen called on Friday afternoon to express concerns about their furniture order. The hospital was renovating their executive conference rooms, and they'd specifically contracted with Thompson's Custom Furniture because of our reputation for medical-grade finishing and construction. David had worked with me personally on the specifications, understanding that hospital furniture required special attention to hygiene, durability, and safety regulations. Dylan took the call personally, confident that he could handle any client concerns through proper relationship management and professional communication. I heard his side of the conversation from my desk, and it became clear within minutes that he was completely unprepared for the technical complexity of medical furniture requirements. David was asking about antimicrobial finishing compounds, fire retardant treatments, and structural load ratings for conference tables that might need to support medical equipment during emergency meetings. Dylan's responses revealed the depth of his inexperience. He assured David that all furniture would meet standard commercial grades, not understanding that hospitals required specialized certifications. When David asked about specific compliance documentation, Dylan promised to have Linda Walsh forward the appropriate paperwork, not realizing that we'd never needed such documentation because I'd always handled medical projects personally, ensuring that every specification was met through direct craftsman expertise rather than certified processes. The call ended with David requesting a meeting with me to review the project specifications and confirm that all medical requirements would be properly addressed. Dylan's response was immediate and defensive, insisting that he was fully capable of handling all client interactions and that the new management structure didn't allow for direct craftsman-client communication. David's reply was polite but firm. Without technical confirmation from Marcus Thompson, the hospital would need to suspend the project pending review by their procurement committee. By closing time Friday, Dylan had managed to create problems with 3 major clients in his first week of leadership. Pacific Cascade had rejected a delivery, Cascade Heights was threatening contract breach, and Portland General Hospital was questioning our ability to meet medical standards. Each situation had the same root cause: Dylan's assumption that management skills could substitute for technical expertise, that client relationships could be transferred like office furniture, that 20 years of specialized knowledge could be replaced by efficiency consultants and business school theories. Part 3: The unraveling begins. The weekend passed slowly, giving me time to think about the trajectory Dylan had set for the company. I spent Saturday in my home workshop, a converted garage where I'd built furniture for friends and family over the years. Working with my hands, feeling the wood respond to careful attention reminded me why I'd fallen in love with this craft in the first place. The smell of cedar shavings, the satisfaction of a perfectly cut joint, the way grain patterns revealed themselves under patient sanding, all of it felt like coming home after a week in exile. Sunday morning brought an unexpected phone call from Mom. She rarely called about business matters, preferring to focus on Dad's recovery and family concerns. But her voice carried an unusual tension as she asked me to meet her at the hospital that afternoon. "Marcus, I need to talk to you about something important," she said. "Not over the phone. Can you come by around 2 o'clock? I agreed immediately, wondering what had prompted this unusual request. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and desperation, familiar scents that had become part of our weekly routine since Dad's stroke. I found Mom in the family waiting area, a stack of papers spread across the small table in front of her. She looked tired, older than her 62 years, worn down by the stress of watching her husband struggle with basic functions that had once been automatic. When she saw me, her expression was a mixture of relief and concern. "Sit down, honey," Mom said, gesturing to the chair beside her. "I've been getting calls at home all weekend. Clients, suppliers, even some of our longtime employees. Everyone wants to know what's happening at the company, and I don't have answers to give them." She picked up one of the papers, a handwritten note covered in phone numbers and messages. "Jennifer Liu called 3 times yesterday. David Chen from the hospital called twice. Jake Morrison stopped by the house this morning to discuss what he called serious operational concerns." I listened as Mom detailed the growing list of problems that Dylan's first week had created. Each phone call had been a variation of the same theme: confusion about new procedures, concerns about quality standards, questions about project timelines, and requests to speak with me about technical issues. The most troubling call had come from Patricia Wells, our family lawyer, who'd reviewed the Pacific Cascade contract after Jennifer Liu contacted her directly. Patricia says there are specific performance clauses in several of our major contracts that might be in jeopardy. Mom continued, her voice growing more strained. Apparently, some of these agreements require particular people to oversee the work, not just the company name. She wants to schedule a meeting this week to review all our active contracts and identify potential legal problems. Mom paused, looking directly at me with the same expression she'd worn when I was 12 and she'd discovered I'd been skipping piano lessons. Marcus, I need you to be honest with me. What's really happening at the company? Dylan assured me that the management changes were necessary for financial stability, that your demotion was part of a broader restructuring plan. But these phone calls suggest something else entirely. Are we in serious trouble? I chose my words carefully, not wanting to undermine Dylan's authority with Mom while also not minimizing the legitimate concerns that were mounting. Mom, Dylan is trying to implement changes that he believes will improve efficiency and profitability. I said, the challenge is that our business isn't like other companies. We've built our reputation on personal relationships and specialized expertise. When you change the people clients work with, especially on technical projects, it creates uncertainty and confusion. I gestured toward the notes she'd been taking. These phone calls are clients trying to understand how the changes will affect their projects. Mom studied my face for a long moment, and I could see her processing not just my words but everything I hadn't said directly. She'd been married to Robert Thompson for 38 years, watching him build the business from a one-man operation into a regional leader in custom furniture. She understood better than anyone the delicate balance between craftsmanship and commerce, the way trust and expertise combine to create lasting client relationships. Your father always said that furniture is a relationship business, Mom said quietly. People don't just buy our pieces because they need somewhere to sit or eat. They buy them because they trust us to understand their vision and create something that will last for generations. She gathered the phone messages into a neat stack, her movements precise and deliberate. Dylan has an MBA, and he's smart about business theory. But theory isn't the same as understanding, is it? Before I could answer, a nurse appeared in the doorway asking if we wanted to visit Dad. We walked together down the sterile hallway to his room, where Robert Thompson lay connected to monitors and machines that tracked every heartbeat and breath. The stroke had stolen his ability to speak clearly, but his eyes remained sharp and alert. When he saw us enter, he managed a weak smile and raised his right hand slightly in greeting. Mom took Dad's hand and began updating him on the weekend's phone calls, speaking in the same calm tone she'd always used when discussing business matters at the dinner table. Dad's expression grew more troubled as she described each conversation, and I could see him processing the implications despite his physical limitations. When Mom mentioned the contract concerns Patricia Wells had raised, Dad's eyes moved to me with an intensity that needed no translation. I pulled a chair close to Dad's bed and leaned forward so he could see my face clearly. Dad, the company is going through some adjustments, I said carefully. Dylan is implementing new management procedures and some clients are having trouble adapting to the changes. Nothing that can't be resolved, but it's requiring more attention than usual. Dad's eyes never left my face as I spoke, and I could see him reading between the lines of my diplomatic language. Dad struggled to form words, his speech slurred but determined. Contracts, he managed to say, followed by something that sounded like protection. Mom squeezed his hand gently, understanding his concern even when the words weren't clear. Dad, Patricia is reviewing all the contracts to make sure everything is properly documented, she said. Marcus knows the technical details better than anyone, so he'll help her understand any special requirements. The visit continued for another hour, with Dad drifting in and out of alertness but always returning his attention to business concerns when he was awake. Before we left, he managed to communicate one more word clearly. Careful, whether he was warning me to be careful with Dylan, careful with the clients, or careful with the company's future, the message was unmistakable. Robert Thompson, even in his diminished state, understood that the business he'd spent 25 years building was in danger. Monday morning brought more evidence of Dylan's inexperience creating real problems. I arrived at work to find Jake Morrison waiting by my desk, his expression grim and his usually steady demeanor showing cracks of frustration. "Marcus, we need to talk," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure we couldn't be overheard. "This morning's production meeting was a disaster. Dylan announced that we're implementing Barnes's efficiency recommendations immediately, starting with the Meridian Restaurant project. The Meridian Restaurant Group had contracted with us to furnish their new flagship location, a high-end establishment that would showcase our work to Portland's most influential diners. The project required 40 custom pieces, each designed to complement the restaurant's specific aesthetic while meeting commercial food service requirements. I'd spent months working with their interior designer, creating pieces that balanced artistic beauty with practical functionality. Jake explained that Dylan had decided to substitute less expensive wood species for the internal framework components, replacing white oak with poplar and hard maple with soft maple. The changes would save approximately 15% on material costs, while compromising the structural integrity and longevity that commercial furniture required. Restaurant pieces needed to withstand constant use, frequent cleaning, and the moisture changes that came from kitchen operations. Poplar and soft maple wouldn't last 2 years under those conditions. I tried to explain the problems to Dylan, Jake continued, but he showed me Barnes's cost analysis proving that internal framework wood doesn't affect appearance or immediate functionality. When I pointed out that commercial furniture needs to last decades, not just pass initial inspection, he said we could address longevity issues through warranty service rather than over-engineering during production. Jake shook his head in disbelief. "Marcus, he wants to build furniture that will fail on purpose so we can charge for repairs later." The situation deteriorated further when Dylan decided to personally communicate the material substitutions to Meridian's interior designer, Rachel Kim. Rachel had worked with us on 3 previous projects and had specifically approved material selections based on durability requirements and aesthetic considerations. She'd chosen white oak and hard maple because their density and grain patterns would complement the restaurant's industrial modern design, while providing the structural strength that commercial seating required. Dylan's email to Rachel was everything that was wrong with his approach to client management. He framed the material changes as optimization improvements that would enhance cost effectiveness without compromising design integrity. He used corporate language to describe what was essentially a bait-and-switch operation, substituting inferior materials after the contract had been signed and approved. Rachel's response arrived within 2 hours, copied to Meridian's general manager and their corporate legal department. "Mr. Thompson," Rachel's email began, "I am extremely concerned about your proposed material substitutions. The specifications we approved were based on extensive research into commercial furniture requirements, and the materials you're suggesting do not meet our durability standards. White oak and hard maple were selected specifically for their performance characteristics in restaurant environments. If Thompson's custom furniture cannot provide the materials specified in our contract, we need to discuss project cancellation and refund options immediately." I read Rachel's email over Dylan's shoulder as he stared at the screen in confusion and growing panic. He'd expected gratitude for his cost-saving initiative and instead received a threat of contract cancellation. Linda Walsh, who'd been standing beside his desk reviewing project timelines, suggested that they schedule a conference call to explain the benefits of the material substitutions and address Rachel's concerns through professional relationship management. The conference call was scheduled for Wednesday morning, giving Dylan 2 days to prepare his argument for why inferior materials were actually an improvement. He spent those 2 days consulting with Barnes and researching talking points about cost optimization and value engineering. What he didn't do was consult with anyone who understood wood properties, commercial furniture requirements, or Rachel Kim's specific design philosophy. Wednesday's call was a masterclass in how not to handle client relations. I listened from my desk as Dylan attempted to convince Rachel that poplar was just as structurally sound as white oak and that soft maple offered equivalent aesthetic qualities to hard maple. Rachel's responses grew increasingly sharp as Dylan demonstrated his fundamental ignorance about material properties and commercial furniture requirements. Mr. Thompson, Rachel said, her professional patience clearly wearing thin, poplar has a compression strength of approximately 5,540 psi, compared to white oak's 7,440 psi. In restaurant seating, that difference translates to failure rates and maintenance costs that my clients cannot accept. Additionally, poplar's moisture absorption characteristics make it completely unsuitable for kitchen environments, where humidity fluctuates constantly. Dylan's response revealed the depth of his inexperience. He assured Rachel that compression strength ratings were engineering overkill for furniture applications and that moisture concerns could be addressed through appropriate finishing techniques. Rachel's silence stretched uncomfortably long before she responded with devastating clarity. Mr. Thompson, I've been designing commercial interiors for 15 years, and I've never encountered a furniture manufacturer who considered structural engineering requirements to be overkill. The fact that you're unfamiliar with basic material properties suggests that Thompson's custom furniture may not be qualified for this project. I'm terminating this call to discuss alternatives with my client. The line went dead, leaving Dylan staring at the phone in shock while Linda Walsh furiously took notes about damage control strategies. Within an hour, Meridian's corporate office had sent a formal letter suspending the project pending review of Thompson's qualifications and requesting documentation of our commercial furniture experience. By end of business Wednesday, our relationship with one of Portland's most prestigious restaurant groups had been destroyed by Dylan's attempt to save 15% on material costs. Thursday brought news that 3 other active projects were experiencing similar problems. Cascade Heights had rejected our revised timeline for their dining room furniture. Portland General Hospital was questioning our medical compliance capabilities. Pacific Cascade Hotels had scheduled a site visit to review quality concerns with their lobby pieces. Each situation had the same underlying cause. Dylan's management decisions were creating problems faster than the company could solve them. I spent Thursday afternoon updating my resume for the first time in 8 years, not because I intended to leave Thompson's custom furniture, but because I needed to document my qualifications and experience for the legal review Patricia Wells was conducting. As I listed 20 years of certifications, completed projects, and client relationships, I began to understand the full scope of what Dylan was trying to replace with efficiency consultants and MBA theories. Master Craftsman certification from the American Furniture Guild. Specialized training in medical furniture compliance. Commercial seating safety certification. 15 major contracts personally negotiated and executed. Client relationships spanning 8 states and 12 industries. Professional recognition from industry publications and trade organizations. None of it could be transferred to Dylan or Linda Walsh through organizational charts or management restructuring. Friday's bombshell arrived in the form of a registered letter from Pacific Cascade Hotel's legal department. Jennifer Liu had escalated the quality concerns to their corporate counsel, who'd reviewed our contract and identified the performance clauses that tied the agreement specifically to my oversight and approval. The letter was professional but unambiguous. Either Marcus Thompson resumed his contractual role on the project immediately, or Pacific Cascade would exercise their right to cancel the agreement and seek damages for project delays. Dylan's reaction was immediate and predictable. He stormed out of his office waving the legal notice and demanding to know why contracts contained unauthorized personnel requirements that undermined company authority. Linda Walsh suggested that they could challenge the clauses as unreasonable or anti-competitive, not understanding that such language was standard in custom work where client relationships and specialized expertise determined project success. Jake Morrison, who'd remained diplomatically silent through most of Dylan's management disasters, finally reached his breaking point. Dylan, those clauses exist because clients pay premium prices for specific expertise. They're not buying Thompson's custom furniture as a brand name. They're buying Marcus Thompson's knowledge, skill, and personal attention to their projects. You can't transfer that through corporate restructuring any more than you can transfer 20 years of experience through a memo. Dylan's face flushed red as Jake spoke, and I could see him struggling to maintain control. Jake, I appreciate your loyalty to Marcus, but this company needs to move beyond dependence on any single individual. That kind of business model is unsustainable and creates unnecessary risks. Jake's response was quiet but devastating. Son, the only risk I see is trying to replace expertise with inexperience and expecting clients to accept the substitution. Your father built this company by understanding that furniture isn't about wood and hardware. It's about trust, skill, and relationships. You can't optimize those things away without destroying everything they support. Part 4. The confrontation I'd been avoiding finally came on Monday morning of Dylan's third week in charge. I arrived at work to find him waiting at my desk, his face drawn with exhaustion and frustration. The past few days had brought more bad news: 2 additional client complaints, a supplier questioning our payment schedule changes, and a scathing review from Barnes's efficiency consultant suggesting that the company's problems stemmed from resistance to necessary modernization by legacy employees. Dylan's appearance had deteriorated noticeably since taking over Dad's office. His expensive suits were wrinkled, his hair uncombed, and his eyes carried the wild look of someone who'd discovered that authority without knowledge was more burden than blessing. He'd been working 16-hour days trying to manage crises that kept multiplying faster than he could address them, learning too late that running a craft-based business required understanding the craft itself. Marcus, we need to talk, Dylan said, his voice carrying a mixture of anger and desperation. In Dad's office now. I followed him upstairs, past the empty workstations where craftsmen were arriving for the morning shift, past Linda Walsh's office where she was already on the phone with another concerned client, past the conference room where charts and graphs from Barnes's efficiency analysis still covered the whiteboard like evidence of failed good intentions. Dad's office felt different with Dylan behind the desk. The warm wood tones and comfortable furniture remained the same, but the atmosphere had changed from welcoming collaboration to adversarial confrontation. Dylan had arranged the chairs so that I sat across from him like a defendant facing judgment, and he'd spread client correspondence across the desk surface like prosecution evidence. I've been reviewing the situation with our major contracts, Dylan began, his voice attempting corporate authority but revealing underlying uncertainty. It's become clear that certain clauses in these agreements are creating unnecessary complications for company management. I need to understand why you negotiated terms that tie specific projects to your personal involvement rather than allowing normal operational flexibility. I studied Dylan's face as he spoke, seeing Dad's features but none of Dad's wisdom or patience. Where Robert Thompson had built relationships through understanding and respect, Dylan was trying to command compliance through position and pressure. He'd inherited Dad's office and title, but he'd missed the fundamental lesson that leadership in a craft-based business came from expertise, not authority. Dylan, those clauses exist because clients in our industry pay premium prices for specific expertise and personal attention. I replied calmly. When someone contracts with Thompson's custom furniture, they're not just buying furniture, they're buying 25 years of reputation, specialized knowledge, and the confidence that their project will receive personal oversight from qualified craftsmen. The clauses protect both the client's investment and our company's liability. Dylan's expression hardened as I explained the reasoning behind contract terms he saw as personal power grabs rather than professional protection. That's exactly the kind of thinking that's holding this company back, he said, leaning forward aggressively. We can't build a sustainable business model around dependence on any individual, including you. These personalized service expectations create operational inefficiencies and prevent proper management control. The conversation continued for 20 minutes, with Dylan arguing for standardized processes and interchangeable personnel, while I tried to explain why craft businesses operated differently from manufacturing companies. He'd absorbed Barnes's efficiency theories completely, seeing every specialized skill and personal relationship as an obstacle to optimization rather than a competitive advantage that justified our premium pricing. Dylan, let me ask you something, I said finally. When Jennifer Liu calls with technical questions about wood joinery, who answers her? When David Chen needs confirmation about medical compliance requirements, who provides the documentation? When Rachel Kim wants to discuss grain pattern matching for commercial seating, who has that conversation? These aren't administrative tasks that can be delegated to any qualified employee. They require specific knowledge and experience that takes years to develop. Dylan's response revealed the depth of his misunderstanding about our business model. Those are exactly the kind of specialized dependencies we need to eliminate, he said confidently. Linda Walsh is researching industry standards and compliance requirements so she can handle technical inquiries professionally. Barnes's team is developing standardized response protocols for client questions. We're creating systems that don't rely on any single person's knowledge or availability. I realized in that moment that Dylan truly believed expertise could be replaced by systems, that 20 years of specialized knowledge could be substituted by research and protocols. He saw my skills as inefficiencies rather than assets, my client relationships as obstacles rather than opportunities, my reputation as a liability rather than the foundation everything else was built on. Dylan, what happens when Linda Walsh tells Jennifer Liu that poplar is structurally equivalent to white oak? What happens when your standardized protocols recommend soft maple for commercial restaurant seating? What happens when Barnes's efficiency systems produce furniture that fails quality inspections or doesn't meet client specifications? I kept my voice level, but I could see Dylan's face growing redder with each question. Those are implementation details that can be refined over time. Dylan snapped. The important thing is establishing proper management authority and operational control. We can't let perfectionist attitudes and artisan traditions prevent necessary business modernization. Dad built this company through hard work and determination, but maintaining it requires professional management and efficient systems. The irony of Dylan's statement wasn't lost on me. Dad had indeed built the company through hard work and determination, but also through expertise, relationships, and an understanding that quality couldn't be compromised without destroying everything quality supported. Dylan was trying to preserve Dad's legacy by dismantling everything that had made it valuable. Dylan, I want to show you something, I said, pulling out my phone and opening the email app. These are messages I've received over the past 3 weeks from clients, suppliers, and industry contacts. I scrolled through dozens of messages, each one asking about project status, expressing concerns about quality changes, or requesting direct communication about technical issues. Jennifer Liu has called me personally 4 times asking about Pacific Cascade specifications. David Chen wants to schedule a site meeting to review hospital compliance requirements. Rachel Kim is questioning whether we can still provide the expertise she contracted for. These aren't administrative inquiries that can be handled through standardized protocols. They're technical consultations that require specialized knowledge. Dylan leaned back in Dad's chair, his expression cycling through anger, frustration, and something that might have been recognition. For a moment I thought he was beginning to understand the complexity of what he'd inherited. But then his jaw set in the stubborn expression I remembered from childhood arguments, and I knew he was going to double down on his position rather than acknowledge his mistakes. Part 3 continued. The breaking point. Marcus, here's what's going to happen, Dylan said, his voice taking on the tone he'd used as a child when he was losing an argument but refused to admit it. You're going to contact these clients and inform them that all future communications must go through proper channels. No more direct phone calls, no more personal consultations, no more undermining the management structure I've established. Either you support the new organizational model or you can find employment elsewhere. The ultimatum hung in the air between us like smoke from a burned bridge. Dylan had finally revealed his true strategy, forced me to choose between compliance and departure, betting that my loyalty to the company would make me surrender my professional relationships and accept his authority without question. What he didn't understand was that those relationships weren't mine to surrender, they belonged to the clients who'd specifically contracted for my expertise, and abandoning them would destroy not just my reputation but the company's credibility. Dylan, I understand your position, I replied carefully, but those clients aren't calling me to undermine your authority. They're calling because their contracts specify my involvement, and they're concerned about project quality and timeline issues. If I stop responding to their technical inquiries, they'll interpret that as breach of contract and seek legal remedies or alternative suppliers. Dylan's face flushed deeper red, and I could see the vein in his temple that used to appear when Mom made him clean his room. Those contracts are with Thompson's Custom Furniture, not with you personally. Any legal challenges can be handled through proper corporate channels and professional representation. What I won't tolerate is employees who think they're more important than the company they work for. The meeting ended with Dylan issuing a written directive that I was to forward all client communications to Linda Walsh within 24 hours and cease all direct contact with project stakeholders. I read the memo twice, recognizing it as either profound ignorance or calculated sabotage. Either way, Dylan had just severed the communication lines that kept our most valuable contracts functional and collaborative. I walked back to my desk carrying the directive like a death certificate for relationships I'd spent years building. Tom Rodriguez looked up from the dining table he was assembling, his experienced eyes reading my expression immediately. "Trouble?" he asked quietly, setting down his chisel and glancing toward the upstairs office where Dylan was presumably celebrating his assertion of management authority. "Dylan wants all client communications to go through Linda Walsh from now on," I said, showing Tom the written directive. "No more direct contact between craftsmen and project stakeholders." Tom's weathered face went through several expressions before settling on resigned disbelief. He'd worked with difficult management before, but never with someone who seemed determined to destroy the very relationships that made the business profitable. "Marcus, that's like telling a surgeon he can't talk to his patients because it undermines hospital administration," Tom said, his voice carrying 20 years of frustration with corporate interference in craft work. "These clients trust us because they know we understand their projects personally. They're not paying premium prices to communicate through administrative assistants who've never held a piece of sandpaper." The ripple effects of Dylan's communication directive began immediately. Jennifer Liu called at 10:30 that morning with urgent questions about wood grain orientation for the Pacific Cascade lobby pieces. Following Dylan's orders, I transferred her to Linda Walsh, who spent 15 minutes explaining the new communication protocols before admitting she didn't understand the technical question. Jennifer's frustration was evident even through the office walls as she demanded to speak with someone who could address her concerns immediately. Linda Walsh, to her credit, tried to bridge the knowledge gap by researching wood grain terminology online while keeping Jennifer on hold. But technical expertise can't be Googled in real time, especially when dealing with complex joinery specifications and aesthetic requirements that require understanding both the wood's properties and the client's vision. After 20 minutes of confusion and escalating tension, Jennifer hung up with a promise to review our options with corporate counsel. David Chen's call an hour later followed the same pattern but with more serious consequences. Portland General Hospital had specific questions about antimicrobial finishing requirements for their conference room furniture, technical specifications that could affect patient safety and regulatory compliance. Linda Walsh's attempt to research medical furniture standards while Chen waited on the phone resulted in incomplete information and growing concern about Thompson's qualifications for healthcare projects. "I need to speak with someone who understands medical furniture compliance immediately," Chen said, his professional patience clearly exhausted. "These aren't general inquiries about wood staining. They're specific questions about chemical compositions, application procedures, and certification documentation that could affect patient safety. If Thompson's custom furniture can't provide qualified technical support, we need to suspend this project until proper expertise can be confirmed. I listened to these conversations from my desk, watching Dylan's communication strategy create exactly the problems I'd predicted. Each transferred call lasted longer than necessary, provided less information than required, and left clients questioning our competence and professionalism. Linda Walsh was intelligent and well-intentioned, but she was trying to substitute research for experience, reading for understanding, corporate protocols for craftsman expertise. By afternoon, the situation had deteriorated beyond individual client complaints into systematic breakdown of project management. Rachel Kim from Meridian Restaurant Group called to discuss grain pattern coordination for their custom seating, a conversation that required understanding both wood selection principles and commercial furniture durability requirements. Linda Walsh's attempt to address these concerns using information from furniture manufacturing websites resulted in recommendations that were technically incorrect and potentially dangerous for restaurant applications. "I'm sorry, but this conversation is going nowhere," Rachel said after 20 minutes of miscommunication and confusion. "I need to speak with Marcus Thompson directly about these specifications, or Meridian will need to consider alternative suppliers who can provide qualified technical support. This isn't about company hierarchy or communication protocols, it's about professional competence and project safety." Dylan's response to the mounting client complaints was predictable and counterproductive. He scheduled an emergency meeting with Linda Walsh and Jake Morrison to discuss resistance to new management procedures and employee sabotage of operational efficiency. The meeting took place in the conference room with the door closed, but voices carried through the thin walls as Dylan blamed the communication problems on my failure to properly brief Linda Walsh on technical requirements. "Marcus is deliberately withholding information to make the new system look bad," Dylan argued, his voice rising with frustration and paranoia. "He's trying to prove that the company can't function without him, but that's exactly the kind of dependency we need to eliminate. Linda is perfectly capable of handling client communications if she receives proper support and cooperation from the technical staff." Jake Morrison's response was measured but firm, carrying the weight of 2 decades' experience with both Robert Thompson's leadership style and the realities of craft-based business operations. "Dylan, the problem isn't Marcus withholding information. The problem is that technical expertise can't be transferred through memos or training sessions. When Jennifer Liu asks about wood grain orientation, she needs to talk to someone who understands both the structural requirements and the aesthetic implications. That knowledge comes from years of hands-on experience, not from internet research." The meeting continued for an hour, with Dylan insisting that communication problems could be solved through better documentation and more detailed procedures, while Jake tried to explain that client relationships in craft businesses were built on trust, expertise, and personal interaction. Linda Walsh, caught between her loyalty to Dylan and her growing recognition of the technical challenges, suggested hiring additional consultants to provide specialized knowledge that the current staff apparently lacked. Wednesday brought the crisis Dylan had been avoiding since taking control. Pacific Cascade Hotel's corporate legal department sent a formal notice of contract breach, citing failure to provide designated technical oversight and declining quality standards as grounds for project termination. The letter was comprehensive and devastating, documenting every communication failure, every missed specification, and every instance where Linda Walsh's inexperience had created confusion or delay. "Thompson's custom furniture has failed to provide the technical expertise specified in our agreement," the letter stated with legal precision. "Marcus Thompson, designated as project oversight craftsman, has been replaced by administrative personnel lacking appropriate qualifications. Quality standards have declined measurably since this change, as evidenced by rejected deliveries and failed inspections. Pacific Cascade exercises its right to terminate this agreement immediately and seek damages for project delays and additional costs." The financial impact was immediate and catastrophic. Pacific Cascade's $2.3 million contract represented nearly 40% of Thomson's annual revenue, and its cancellation would force layoffs, supplier payment delays, and potential bankruptcy within 6 months. Dylan stared at the legal notice with the expression of someone who just realized that business school theories didn't translate directly into real-world solutions. Jake Morrison's reaction was grimmer than I'd ever seen him. He'd survived economic downturns, material shortages, and competitive pressures during his 20 years with the company, but he'd never faced a crisis created entirely by management incompetence. "Dylan, this is exactly what I've been trying to explain," he said quietly. "These clients didn't contract with Thomson's Custom Furniture as a brand name. They contracted for specific expertise and personal attention. When you remove those elements, you remove the value proposition that justified our premium pricing." Dylan's response revealed how completely he'd misunderstood the fundamental nature of our business. "This is obviously retaliation for implementing necessary operational changes," he said, his voice carrying more desperation than conviction. "Pacific Cascade is using contract technicalities to avoid paying for work we've already completed. We'll fight this through legal channels and demonstrate that their demands for specific personnel are unreasonable and anti-competitive." Patricia Wells, our family lawyer, arrived Thursday morning for the contract review Mom had requested. She spent 3 hours examining our active agreements, comparing standard industry language with the specific clauses I'd negotiated over the years. Her findings confirmed what I'd known all along: nearly every major contract contained provisions that tied project success to my personal involvement, expertise, or approval. "These aren't unusual contract terms," Patricia explained to Dylan and Linda Walsh during their emergency consultation. "In craft-based industries, clients routinely specify particular artisans, designers, or technical experts for their projects. It's similar to hiring a specific surgeon for medical procedures or a particular architect for building design. The client is paying for individual expertise, not just company services." Dylan argued that such provisions created unacceptable business risks and operational inflexibility, but Patricia's response was unambiguous. "The risk isn't in having these clauses," she said firmly. "The risk is in violating them. Marcus negotiated these terms to protect both the company and the clients. Without his technical oversight, Thomson's Custom Furniture can't fulfill the quality guarantees and performance standards that justify your premium pricing." The legal consultation ended with Patricia recommending immediate restoration of my project oversight responsibilities to prevent additional contract breaches and potential lawsuits. Dylan's face cycled through anger, embarrassment, and something that might have been panic as he realized that his management reforms had created legal liabilities rather than operational improvements. Friday morning brought news that transformed the crisis from serious to existential. Cascade Heights had formally canceled their dining room project, citing quality concerns and communication failures. Meridian Restaurant Group had suspended their contract pending review of our technical qualifications. Portland General Hospital was seeking alternative suppliers for their conference room furniture. In 1 month, Dylan's management had destroyed relationships that had taken years to build and represented millions of dollars in future revenue. The workshop atmosphere reflected the growing sense of crisis. Craftsmen who'd worked confidently on long-term projects now faced uncertainty about continued employment. Suppliers were calling daily about payment schedules and future orders. Jake Morrison spent most of his time fielding questions from concerned employees who'd heard rumors about financial problems and potential layoffs. I sat at my small desk in the quality control area watching the systematic destruction of everything Dad had built. Dylan's office lights stayed on until midnight as he worked frantically with Linda Walsh and Barnes's consulting team to develop damage control strategies and client retention plans. But you can't repair trust through management consultants, and you can't restore expertise through organizational charts. The most heartbreaking moment came Friday afternoon when Sarah Kim approached my desk with tears in her eyes. She'd been working on a custom jewelry cabinet for a longtime client. a piece that required intricate inlay work and perfect grain matching. Under the old system, she would have consulted with me throughout the process, discussing wood selection, joinery techniques, and finishing approaches to ensure the final piece met both technical standards and aesthetic expectations. "Marcus, I don't know what to do," Sarah said quietly, her voice heavy with frustration and professional shame. "This cabinet needs specialty hinges that aren't in our standard inventory, but Linda Walsh says I can't contact suppliers directly anymore. All purchasing requests have to go through her, but she doesn't understand the technical requirements or why these particular hinges are necessary for this design." Sarah's dilemma illustrated the broader problem Dylan's management structure had created. Craft work required constant decision-making based on technical knowledge, aesthetic judgment, and understanding of both materials and client expectations. By inserting administrative layers between craftsmen and the resources they needed, Dylan had made it impossible for skilled workers to do their jobs effectively. "Sarah, document everything," I advised her. "Write down exactly what you need, why you need it, and what will happen if you can't get it. Keep detailed records of any delays or quality compromises that result from the new procedures. If this project fails to meet client expectations, you want clear documentation showing that the failure wasn't due to your craftsmanship." That evening, I drove to the hospital to visit Dad, carrying news I didn't want to deliver but couldn't avoid sharing. His condition had improved slightly over the past month, and his speech was clearer than it had been since the stroke. When I described the contract cancellations and client complaints, his expression grew dark with understanding and regret. "Mistakes," Dad managed to say, followed by something that sounded like "fix them." I leaned closer to understand his slurred words, and he repeated with effort, "Help him fix them." Even facing the destruction of his life's work, Robert Thompson's first instinct was to protect his son and preserve the family business, not to assign blame or express anger. "Dad, I've tried to help," I said gently, "but Dylan sees my input as interference rather than assistance. He believes that traditional craft methods are inefficient and that business school approaches can optimize our operations. Until he recognizes that our clients pay for expertise rather than efficiency, any advice I offer will be ignored or rejected." Dad's eyes focused on me with surprising intensity, and he struggled to form words that would capture his concern and guidance. "Wait," he finally said clearly. "Let him learn." The message was unmistakable. Sometimes the best teaching comes from allowing people to experience the full consequences of their choices, even when those consequences are painful. Part 4, The Hidden Weapon Revealed. The revelation came on Monday morning of Dylan's 4th week in charge, delivered through a phone call that would change everything. I was reviewing quality control reports when my personal cell phone rang with a number I didn't recognize, area code 206. Seattle. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Marcus Thompson?" The voice was professional, confident, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "My name is Elena Vasquez. I'm the Senior Contracts Manager for Northwest Premier Furnishings. We've been following the situation at Thompson's Custom Furniture with great interest. Northwest Premier was our biggest regional competitor, a company that had tried to poach our major clients for years without success." "Miss Vasquez, I'm not sure what situation you're referring to," I replied carefully, not wanting to discuss company problems with a competitor. "Thompson's Custom Furniture is operating normally under new management." Elena's laugh was knowing and not entirely friendly. "Marcus, we've received calls from 3 of your former clients in the past week. Pacific Cascade, Meridian Restaurant Group, and Cascade Heights have all inquired about our capabilities for projects they were previously committed to with Thompson's. They're specifically asking whether we have craftsmen with your qualifications and experience." The call continued for 10 minutes, with Elena probing delicately about my employment status and future plans while sharing information about client defections that Dylan hadn't yet learned about. Northwest Premier had built their business model around poaching projects from smaller companies, and they recognized opportunity when management incompetence created openings in established client relationships. "I want to be direct with you, Marcus," Elena said as the conversation wound down. We've been trying to compete with Thompson's for years, but your reputation and expertise gave you advantages we couldn't match. If that expertise became available, we'd be very interested in discussing opportunities that would benefit everyone involved. She left her direct number and an invitation to call if my situation changed. I hung up feeling a mixture of validation and sadness. Competitors were circling Thompson's custom furniture like vultures around roadkill, recognizing that Dylan's management had created opportunities they'd never had before. The company's competitive advantages were walking out the door along with client relationships and industry respect. The second call came an hour later from Jennifer Liu at Pacific Cascade Hotels. Her voice was apologetic but firm as she explained that corporate legal had advised her to contact me directly about project transition issues. Marcus, I know there are communication protocols at Thompson's now, but I need technical information that only you can provide. We're moving the contract to Northwest Premier, but they need detailed specifications for work already completed. Jennifer's request put me in an impossible position. Dylan's directive prohibited direct client communication, but Pacific Cascade needed information that only I possessed to transition their project successfully. Refusing to help would damage my professional reputation and potentially expose Thompson's to additional legal claims for failing to provide reasonable cooperation during contract termination. Jennifer, I understand your position, I said carefully. Let me contact Dylan Thompson and Linda Walsh to discuss how we can best support your transition while following proper protocols. Jennifer's response carried a mixture of frustration and sympathy. Marcus, I've been in the commercial furniture business for 12 years and I've never seen a company create so many problems for itself through management changes. You built something special at Thompson's and it's heartbreaking to watch it fall apart because someone doesn't understand what made it valuable. I spent the rest of Monday documenting every client interaction, contract clause, and technical specification that might be relevant to the growing legal and financial crisis. Dylan's communication restrictions meant I couldn't address client concerns directly, but I could prepare comprehensive information packages that Linda Walsh could use to support damage control efforts. Tuesday brought news that transformed my understanding of the entire situation. Mom called during lunch asking me to meet her at Patricia Wells's law office that afternoon. Patricia has discovered something important about the contracts, Mom said, her voice carrying an excitement I hadn't heard since Dad's stroke. She wants to explain it to both of us together. Patricia's office was located in downtown Portland, occupying the top floor of a restored brick building that showcased the kind of craftsmanship our company had once been known for. Patricia had been the Thompson family lawyer for 15 years, handling everything from business formation documents to Dad's estate planning. She knew our industry and understood the unique challenges craft-based businesses faced. I've completed my review of all active contracts, Patricia began, spreading documents across her mahogany conference table. What I found is quite remarkable. Marcus, you've systematically protected Thompson's custom furniture through contract language that most people wouldn't recognize as strategic planning. She pointed to highlighted sections in nearly every agreement. These clauses requiring your personal oversight aren't just quality assurance measures, Patricia continued. They're actually ownership provisions that give you individual control over the company's most valuable assets, client relationships, and ongoing revenue streams. If Dylan's management changes prevent you from fulfilling these contractual obligations, the clients have grounds to void their agreements entirely. I studied the documents Patricia had prepared, seeing familiar language in a new light. Provisions I'd negotiated to protect project quality had inadvertently created a legal framework that made me indispensable to the company's financial survival. Every major contract was structured so that my removal would trigger client termination rights, effectively giving me veto power over Dylan's management decisions. Patricia, are you saying that Dylan can't legally demote Marcus without risking contract cancellations? Mom asked, her business instincts clearly engaged despite her focus on Dad's recovery. Patricia's response was precise and devastating. I'm saying that Dylan has already triggered contract cancellation rights by removing Marcus from his designated oversight role. Pacific Cascade's termination notice is legally sound and completely enforceable. If other clients follow suit, Thompson's custom furniture could face bankruptcy within months. Patricia paused to let the implications sink in before continuing. However, there's another aspect to consider. These contracts don't just protect the clients, they protect Marcus as well. His individual expertise and professional reputation are legally recognized as company assets that can't be arbitrarily transferred or eliminated. Dylan's demotion could be challenged as breach of Marcus's employment agreement and damage to his professional standing. The meeting continued for 2 hours as Patricia explained the legal complexities surrounding craft-based businesses and individual expertise. Employment law in creative industries was more nuanced than standard corporate relationships, particularly when an employee's personal skills and reputation constituted significant company value. Dylan's MBA training hadn't prepared him for the legal realities of managing craftsmen whose individual talents were contractually protected assets. "What are our options?" Mom asked as the consultation wound down. Patricia's response outlined several possibilities, none of them simple or guaranteed. Legal challenges could force Dylan to restore my position, but they would also create family conflict and potentially damage the company's reputation further. Alternatively, I could leverage my contractual position to negotiate better terms or even consider outside opportunities with competitors. The most important thing to understand, Patricia concluded, is that Marcus holds considerably more power than anyone has recognized. His expertise isn't just valuable, it's legally protected and contractually essential. Dylan's management changes have inadvertently given Marcus significant leverage to influence the company's future direction. I left Patricia's office with a completely different understanding of my situation. What had felt like professional exile was actually strategic positioning, and what Dylan saw as necessary management reform was legally questionable and financially catastrophic. The contracts I'd negotiated to protect our clients had also protected my individual role in ways I'd never fully appreciated. Wednesday morning brought confirmation of Patricia's analysis when Meridian Restaurant Group formally invoked their contract termination clause. Their legal notice was more detailed than Pacific Cascade's, specifically citing the removal of Marcus Thompson from project oversight as breach of agreed-upon service provisions. Rachel Kim had documented every communication failure and quality concern, building a comprehensive case for contract voiding and potential damages. Dylan's reaction was immediate and predictable. Panic followed by anger followed by desperate attempts to find someone else to blame. He scheduled emergency meetings with Linda Walsh, Barnes' consulting team, and even the company's insurance representative to explore options for challenging client termination rights. Each consultation delivered the same message: the contracts were legally binding, the termination clauses were enforceable, and Thompson's custom furniture had no reasonable legal remedy. "This is sabotage," Dylan declared during Thursday's crisis meeting, his voice carrying the strain of sleepless nights and mounting pressure. Marcus deliberately negotiated these clauses to create dependency and prevent normal business operations. No reasonable company would accept such restrictive contract terms. Jake Morrison's response was quiet but devastatingly accurate. "Dylan, every major client specifically requested those clauses. They weren't imposed by Marcus, they were demanded by customers who'd been burned by other suppliers who changed personnel mid-project. These provisions exist because clients learned that their investment was only as good as the people managing their projects." Linda Walsh, who'd spent days trying to manage client relationships she didn't understand, offered her own perspective on the crisis. "I've researched industry standards and spoke with consultants from other furniture companies," she said carefully. "Marcus's contract language is actually common practice in high-end custom work. Clients routinely specify particular craftsmen or designers for their projects. The problem isn't the contracts, it's that we removed the person they specifically contracted to work with. Thursday afternoon brought the call I'd been expecting since Patricia's revelation. Elena Vasquez from Northwest Premier phoned again, this time with a specific offer rather than general interest. Marcus, we've had extensive discussions with Pacific Cascade and Meridian about their terminated contracts. Both clients are willing to continue their projects with Northwest Premier under one condition: you would serve as their designated craftsman and project manager. Elena's offer was comprehensive and tempting: lead craftsman position, salary increase of 40%, full creative control over projects, and equity participation in a company that understood the value of individual expertise. Northwest Premier had learned from watching Thompson's struggle, recognizing that craft businesses succeeded through talent retention rather than talent replacement. I need time to consider your offer, I told Elena, though part of me had already made the decision. There are family considerations and professional obligations I need to address before making any commitments. Elena's response indicated she understood the complexity of my situation. Marcus, take all the time you need. But understand that this opportunity exists because of problems at Thompson's that aren't likely to resolve themselves. Dylan's management approach is fundamentally incompatible with craft-based business operations. The longer you stay, the more damage will be done to your professional reputation and the relationships you've built over 20 years. That evening, I sat in my home workshop thinking about Elena's offer and Patricia's legal analysis. The smell of cedar shavings and the familiar weight of hand tools provided clarity that corporate offices and conference rooms couldn't offer. For the first time since Dylan's takeover, I had leverage to influence my situation rather than simply enduring it. The hidden weapon Patricia had discovered wasn't just contract language, it was recognition that my expertise had value independent of Thompson's custom furniture. Dylan could demote my title and cut my salary, but he couldn't diminish my skills or transfer my reputation. The clients who'd specifically contracted for my involvement weren't just seeking quality craftsmanship, they were investing in relationships built on trust and demonstrated competence. Friday morning arrived with news that completed my understanding of the power dynamics Dylan had unknowingly created. Cascade Heights had sent a final notice regarding their dining room project, offering Thompson's one last opportunity to restore Marcus Thompson to his designated oversight role before terminating their contract permanently. The letter was diplomatic but firm, giving Dylan until Monday to reverse his management decisions or face another multi-million-dollar contract cancellation. I watched Dylan read the ultimatum from my desk in the quality control area, seeing his face cycle through disbelief, anger, and something approaching recognition. For the first time since taking control, he was confronting the reality that his authority was limited by forces beyond his control. He could command employees, restructure operations, and implement efficiency systems, but he couldn't force clients to accept substitutes for expertise they'd specifically contracted to receive. The weekend stretched ahead like a crossroads, offering multiple paths with dramatically different consequences. I could use my legal leverage to force Dylan to restore my position, creating family conflict but preserving the company Dad had built. I could accept Elena's offer and start fresh with a competitor who understood the value of individual talent. Or I could continue watching Dylan's management destroy Thompson's custom furniture while remaining technically blameless for the outcome. Sunday evening, I made my decision. Not out of anger or revenge, but from recognition that sometimes the most powerful response to poor leadership is simply allowing it to demonstrate its own inadequacy. Dylan had created this crisis through arrogance and inexperience, and he would need to resolve it through wisdom and humility. Whether he possessed those qualities remained to be seen, but I knew exactly what I would do on Monday morning. Part 5. The strategic response. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crystal clarity that comes from making difficult decisions based on clear principles rather than immediate emotions. I dressed carefully in my best work clothes, not the expensive suits Dylan favored, but the clean jeans and quality button-down shirt that marked me as a craftsman who took pride in his appearance and his work. Today would require both professional competence and personal dignity. Dylan was already in Dad's office when I arrived, surrounded by legal documents, financial reports, and what appeared to be several draft letters to clients. Linda Walsh sat across from him, her laptop open to spreadsheets that probably tracked the mounting costs of his management experiment. Through the glass walls, I could see Barnes consulting via video conference, his efficiency charts replaced by damage control strategies and crisis management protocols. I walked directly to my desk in the quality control area and began my normal morning routine, reviewing completed pieces, checking project timelines, and examining work orders for technical accuracy. But this morning was different because I knew exactly what was coming, and I was prepared to respond with the strategic patience Dad had taught me 20 years ago. The first call came at 9:15. Cascade Heights project manager, demanding a final answer about Marcus Thompson's restoration to oversight responsibilities before they initiated contract termination procedures. Dylan took the call personally, his voice carrying false confidence as he assured the client that Thompson's custom furniture had qualified personnel to handle all project requirements. The conversation lasted 12 minutes and ended with Cascade Heights scheduling a site visit for Wednesday to personally evaluate our capabilities. Jennifer Liu called at 9:45 with similar demands. Pacific Cascade's legal department wanted immediate confirmation that I would resume my contractual role, or they would proceed with formal contract cancellation and pursue damages for project delays. Dylan attempted to negotiate alternative arrangements, suggesting that Linda Walsh could serve as project coordinator with my technical consultation, but Jennifer's response was uncompromising. "Mr. Thompson, our contract doesn't specify consultation or coordination," Jennifer said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd reviewed the legal language carefully. "It specifies Marcus Thompson as designated craftsman with full project oversight responsibility. Either he resumes that role immediately, or Pacific Cascade exercises its termination rights today." I listened to these conversations while continuing my quality control work, noting that Dylan's responses revealed his growing recognition of the impossible position he'd created. He couldn't restore my position without admitting that his management reforms had been fundamentally flawed, but he couldn't maintain his current course without losing the contracts that kept the company solvent. The crisis reached its peak when Rachel Kim from Meridian Restaurant Group called at 10:30 with an ultimatum that stripped away any remaining ambiguity. "Thompson, I've spent the weekend reviewing our options with corporate counsel," Rachel said, her professional patience clearly exhausted. "Meridian is terminating our contract with Thompson's custom furniture effective immediately. We're moving the project to Northwest Premier, where Marcus Thompson will serve as lead craftsman, under arrangements that guarantee the expertise we originally contracted for." Dylan's face went white as Rachel explained that Northwest Premier had offered to hire me specifically to complete Meridian's project, along with any other Thompson's clients who chose to transfer their contracts. The conversation ended with Rachel requesting immediate access to all project files and work completed to date, information that would allow Northwest Premier to continue the project without interruption. I felt the workshop's atmosphere change as news of the Meridian termination spread through informal networks, faster than official communications. Craftsmen who'd worked on the restaurant project gathered in small groups, discussing implications they understood better than Dylan's management team. These weren't just contract cancellations, they were professional reputation disasters that would affect every employee's future opportunities. Tom Rodriguez approached my desk during the lunch break, his expression carrying 20 years of accumulated wisdom about family business dynamics and workplace politics. "Marcus, what's your read on this situation?" he asked quietly, glancing toward Dylan's office where emergency meetings had been running continuously since morning. "Tom, Dylan's learning that managing a craft business requires understanding the craft itself," I replied carefully. He thought he could optimize operations through efficiency systems and professional management, but our clients pay for personal relationships and individual expertise. Those things can't be systematized or transferred through organizational charts. Tom nodded slowly, processing implications that went beyond immediate crisis management. Son, I've worked for 3 generations of Thompsons, and I've never seen the company face problems like this. Your grandfather built the foundation, your father expanded it, and you've maintained the reputation that keeps us competitive. If Dylan can't recognize that, there might not be a 4th generation to carry on. The afternoon brought confirmation of the pattern I'd expected since Patricia's legal analysis. Cascade Heights formally terminated their contract after Dylan refused to restore my oversight role, citing quality concerns and communication failures as justification for immediate project cancellation. Portland General Hospital suspended their furniture order pending review of our medical compliance capabilities, specifically questioning whether Linda Walsh possessed the qualifications required for healthcare projects. Each termination notice followed the same format: professional language describing contractual obligations that Thompson's custom furniture could no longer fulfill, specific references to expertise and oversight requirements that had been compromised through management changes, and formal documentation of attempts to resolve issues through direct communication that had been unsuccessful. By 3 o'clock Monday afternoon, Thompson's custom furniture had lost 4 major contracts representing nearly 60% of annual revenue. Dylan's management experiment had destroyed in 1 month what Dad had spent 25 years building, and the financial consequences would force immediate layoffs and potential bankruptcy within 60 days. Jake Morrison finally reached his breaking point during Monday's emergency staff meeting. Dylan had gathered all employees to explain the contract situations and outline his plans for addressing client concerns through improved service standards and enhanced quality control procedures. His presentation was everything wrong with corporate responses to craft business problems, lots of buzzwords about customer satisfaction and operational excellence, but no recognition of the fundamental expertise and relationship issues that had created the crisis. Dylan, I need to say something, Jake interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd helped build the company from nothing. These contract cancellations aren't happening because of service standards or quality control procedures. They're happening because you removed the person these clients specifically contracted to work with. Marcus isn't just an employee who can be replaced through organizational restructuring, he's the foundation that everything else is built on. Dylan's response revealed how completely he'd misunderstood the situation, even after 4 weeks of mounting evidence. Jake, I appreciate your loyalty to Marcus, but this company can't be held hostage by dependency on any single individual. If clients can't accept reasonable management changes, then maybe they weren't the kind of clients we should be working with anyway. The workshop fell silent as Dylan's words sank in. He'd just dismissed 4 major clients representing millions of dollars in revenue as unreasonable, rather than acknowledging that his management changes had violated contractual obligations and professional standards. Sarah Kim was the first to respond, her voice quiet but firm. Dylan, these clients aren't being unreasonable, they're protecting their investments by insisting on the expertise they paid for. When someone contracts for Marcus's personal involvement, they're buying 20 years of experience and a reputation for excellence. You can't substitute that with management theories and efficiency consultants. The meeting ended with Dylan retreating to his office while employees discussed job security and alternative employment options in hushed conversations throughout the workshop. Word had already spread through Portland's craft community about Thompson's problems, and several employees had received inquiries from competitors looking to hire experienced craftsmen from a company that appeared to be failing. Tuesday morning brought the call I'd been expecting since Elena Vasquez's first contact. Northwest Premier's formal offer arrived via email, comprehensive and generous lead craftsman position with full creative authority, 60% salary increase over my original Thompson's compensation, equity participation in company growth, and immediate transfer of any Thompson's clients who chose to follow my expertise to a new supplier. Elena's cover letter was diplomatically worded but clear in its implications. Northwest Premier had recognized an opportunity to acquire both skilled personnel and established client relationships through a single strategic hire. They weren't just offering me employment, they were offering to rebuild my professional platform with financial backing and operational support that Thompson's could no longer provide. I printed the offer and read it carefully while sitting at my small desk in the quality control area, surrounded by half-finished projects that might never be completed, and quality standards that were being systematically compromised through efficiency pressures. For the first time in weeks, I felt excited about future possibilities rather than resigned to ongoing deterioration. The decision-making process took exactly 30 minutes. I wrote 2 letters, one accepting Northwest Premier's offer with a start date of the following Monday, and another formally resigning from Thompson's Custom Furniture effective immediately. Both letters were professional and brief, focusing on facts rather than emotions or explanations that might be misinterpreted as criticism or vindictiveness. I delivered my resignation to Dylan personally, walking into Dad's office with the same calm dignity I'd maintained throughout his management experiment. Dylan looked up from financial reports that documented the cost of his leadership decisions, his face showing the strain of sleepless nights and mounting pressure from creditors, suppliers, and remaining clients. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.